Hello, my name is Chase Woods and welcome to my EUB420 context analysis. The dominance of Eurocentric literary traditions in English assessments is negatively impacting culturally and linguistically diverse students, limiting their ability to engage with and succeed in the curriculum. This issue is particularly pressing in 2025 as Australian classrooms reflect immense cultural diversity with students from over 2,000 different ethnic backgrounds. At Blackwater State High, this diversity is evident with 28% of students identifying as First Nations and 16% EALD. This problem is caused by two main defining factors, including the summative assessment formats and the text selected to be central to these assessments. The UREC curriculum content descriptor creating text prioritizes Eurocentric assessment formats like analytical essays, persuasive texts, and narratives, which require advanced cognitive academic language proficiency, specific structures, and elaborated codes. These skills align with the middle-class Anglo-Australian students' habitus, enabling them to leverage their linguistic capital for academic success. However, English assessments often undervalue the linguistic habitus and diverse knowledge of culturally diverse students who may rely on basic interpersonal communication and restricted codes, often preventing them from utilizing their linguistic capital. The English curriculum doesn't prescribe specific texts for assessment, only that they hold cultural and aesthetic value. It suggests including texts from Asia and by First Nations authors. However, teachers often default to the English canon due to its established literary prestige. These texts, rooted in Eurocentric privilege, marginalize minority perspectives, contradicting the Alice Springs Education Declaration's commitment to supporting First Nations learners through inclusive curriculum priorities. With a lack of curriculum guidance, some teachers unintentionally integrate Western authors' perspectives of First Nations people's experiences. This misalignment within the context text model reinforces Eurocentric narratives and silences First Nations people's voices. The chain on the left shows that the English assessments favour the Western canon due to the absence of curriculum descriptors on First Nations histories and cultures, which stems from ACARA's failure to address the lack of First Nations perspectives despite recognising their importance in student learning. This is because the curriculum itself is shaped by British colonial influences, which privilege Western ways of knowing, being and doing, reflecting a historical disregard for First Nations people and perspectives. Another root cause is the lack of teacher education on diverse learners, rooted in institutionalised neglect of minority groups in schools, further reinforcing colonialism in English assessments. Pause here to view the full chain of root causes. This issue distorts students' understanding of diverse cultures, undermining the government's goal of social, linguistic, and cultural inclusion in the Alice Springs Education Declaration, which emphasises the importance of culturally responsive teaching. The English curriculum enforces standardization, decontextualization, and high-stakes testing forms of institutional control to determine student achievement, which results in pedagogies of indifference, thus impacting the inclusivity of assessments by failing to accommodate to the cultural and linguistic differences in students. Neoliberal processes assess skills through a Western lens, inaccurately representing CALD students' knowledge. Eurocentric texts reinforce colonial portrayals of culture, distorting students' understanding of First Nations perspectives and undermining inclusion goals set in the Alice Springs Education Declaration. Relying on canonical literature unconsciously reinforces whose voices are valued, disengaging diverse learners who don't see themselves represented. A reliance on canonical text limits students' critical literacy by reducing opportunities to analyse the links between context, language, and meaning across diverse cultural and social contexts. Assessments favour Anglo-Australian linguistic norms, disadvantaging EALD and First Nations students, impacting their self-esteem and engagement as they are positioned to be not knowledgeable. We just talked in depth about the perspective of the issue from our main stakeholder, which is the students. Another stakeholder includes school leadership, who, unlike other stakeholders, have a legal obligation to abide by the First Nations and inclusive education policies, making them invested in working towards ensuring that all students are receiving equitable English assessments. The stakeholder of parents, like students, have an investment in their child's academic success, wanting to ensure their achievements are measured fairly through equitable assessments. The parents of Blackwater's First Nations students may feel strongly about the misrepresentation of First Nations culture in the school, indicating their position of ensuring First Nations culture is portrayed authentically to their students. The stakeholder of the Brogan Aboriginal Cultural Services, like school leadership, are First Nations educators who are invested in ensuring the school's education aligns with the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Education Policy of 1989. Like First Nations parents and students, they may share concerns or be angered by the misrepresentation of culture in texts. A possible innovation involves prompting students to engage with a diverse range of non-Eurocentric storytelling traditions, particularly First Nation cultures, and creating their own original story inspired by these traditions. A First Nation guest speaker will share storytelling practices, and both parents and students will be encouraged to explore and share stories from their own cultures. Instead of a traditional narrative, students will present their understanding through creative responses, such as visual narratives, spoken word, or dramatic retellings. and then they will reflect on the techniques used within their stories to convey meaning in a verbal or written format. This innovation teaches First Nations storytelling in a multi-dimensional way, allowing students to engage with authentic lived experiences and truth-telling about First Nations histories, fostering cultural respect and inclusion. It promotes diverse voices, ensuring culturally diverse students feel represented. By collaborating with parents and students to source authentic stories, teachers address the root cause of misrepresentation in text. The innovation supports linguistically diverse students by offering various response formats, ensuring their knowledge is assessed independently from English proficiency. This aligns with the Alice Springs Education Declaration's goal of promoting excellence and equity for all students. According to the Australian Council for the Arts, I will have to seek funding to appropriately compensate the First Nations guest speaker. This may involve a monetary value which I will need to seek approval for from the Head of Department or P&C Committee. As with the stories told to students, I must ensure that the intellectual property of the author and culture is maintained. This involves teaching my students of the ethical use and adaptation of storytelling traditions. Some students and parents may hesitate to share stories from their cultures, so I will proactively seek diverse cultural stories and use the cultural authenticity scale to assess their appropriateness. The First Nations guest speaker will be consulted to ensure that the innovation aligns with their cultural beliefs regarding story sharing. A new marking guide will be created that focuses on content and creativity, excluding grammar, punctuation, and spelling to accommodate for diverse communication.